Hello, my name is Anna Kay. I am one of the behavior support specialists with Albuquerque Public Schools, and my team and I have created this short webinar to make a space to begin thinking about routines and procedures and how to effectively transfer student skills from the virtual setting into the hybrid setting. So naturally, there is a lot of trepidation for many of us around moving from virtual teaching to a hybrid model. There is understandable anxiety around the fact that we may not know exactly what hybrid will look like. And this is stressful when so much of this is out of our control as the classroom teacher. So in this space, we're going to focus on what we can control, or at least what we can influence. And that is ensuring that we give students the skills to systematically follow routines and procedures in the virtual and physical learning space. So let's start with just some basic definitions. When we're talking about a routine, we mean a well-modeled and reinforced course of action or response to a teacher's directive. So an example of a routine that you may have in your virtual classroom is the way in which students respond to a classmate's post on Flipgrid, right? The expectations for how that takes place. That would be considered a routine. Now, a procedure is a method or process of how things should be done in the classroom. So this is typically a series of smaller tasks. So a procedure in your virtual space may be the process in which students resubmit corrected assignments on your Google Classroom site. This is a procedure because it's made up of some smaller tasks. For our purpose today, we're really going to use these terms in conjunction and interchangeably. So understanding the subtle differences between the two really is not all that important. But we did just want you to have these definitions to reference should you need them. So we know that clear, consistent, and reinforced routines and procedures create a classroom culture built on respect and safety. If we want students to develop the necessary academic, social, emotional, and physical knowledge and skills to be successful in our classrooms and beyond, we need routines and procedures. We also need to remember that in order for students to perform routines and procedures fluently, we need to give them adequate opportunities to practice these skills. We need to provide feedback and reinforce student success with behavior-specific praise. So I've heard many times, and I'm sure you have too, and many of us have probably even said out loud, well, I told my students the expectation, right? I told them what to do, so they should know how to do it. Unfortunately, when it comes to behavioral fluency, just telling students what to do is not enough. Even our older students, our middle school and high school students. So practice, feedback, and reinforcement are always going to be key. So moving into hybrid teaching is overwhelming, naturally. But we can alleviate some of that stress by building on the existing foundation that we already have created in our virtual setting. So we're going to do a quick reflection. If you're watching a recording of this webinar, you may consider pausing the video to answer the following questions. I'd like us to think about three things. First, what routines and procedures do you already have in place in the virtual setting that are working well? Two, how do you know that they're working well? What evidence do you have? And three, what routines and procedures will you need in the hybrid setting in order for your students to be successful? So now that you have a clear picture of what is already working well in your classroom and have started to tease out the skills that your students will need in the hybrid setting, I want to introduce you to two important terms that will help us in our next steps: upskill and reskill. And we're going to use these concepts to build upon the skills our students already have in the virtual setting. So an upskill. An upskill means enhancing skills within existing competencies or functions given new conditions. So these are skills that just need translation into a new setting. These are skills that our students already have right now. These are the skills that are working well in our virtual classrooms. So we're going to turn these existing skills into upskills simply by enhancing them so that they function in a new setting, our new setting being the hybrid setting. Now, a reskill means learning entirely new competencies or functions held in separate roles. Reskills are new skills, skills that we need to teach from the ground up, and skills that our students aren't really using in the virtual setting right now. So let's break this down when we're comparing upskills and reskills as we plan to move into hybrid. Let's think about how we can use the concept of upskill versus reskill as it pertains to our students and the routines and procedures that they're going to need in hybrid. So here you can see some examples of upskills over here in this orange section. We're going to look at this one on the left. This skill, upskill, is how do I ask for help when I need it? And who can I ask for help? So this is something that our students are going to need as they move into hybrid learning. But you probably already have a procedure for how students access help in the virtual setting. So when we move to hybrid, this becomes an upskill, a skill that just needs to be enhanced. When we look over here in our blue section, our reskills, one of our procedures to consider is, where do I put my materials when I'm done with my work? This one right here. So as a classroom teacher in the virtual setting, this may not be a routine that you currently have, right? Where students put their materials after they leave your class is largely out of your control or influence. So when students are coming physically into our physical classroom in this hybrid learning model, this is going to be a reskill, right? Something that students will have to be taught from the ground up. We know that lasting change comes from building new behaviors onto existing behaviors. So regardless of what hybrid ends up looking like, the more upskills we have in place rather than brand new skills that need to be taught, the easier that transition into hybrid will be when it comes to our systems of routines and procedures. So we know that upskills are easier to transition to the hybrid or face-to-face setting. So I want you to take a moment to reflect on some of the routines and procedures that you currently have in place. Let's go back to that first reflection where we thought about what was going well in our classrooms. How can we make these routines and procedures that are going well upskills for the hybrid setting rather than reskills? And if we find that we have a lot of reskills that need to be taught from our list of hybrid routines and procedures, how can we begin now while we're still in virtual learning, laying the foundation for these systems in the virtual setting so that they are going to be upskills rather than reskills, right? We want to do less reinventing the wheel and more just modifying the wheel. So again, this may be a good time to pause the video and just reflect on these prompts for a bit. So some examples, right, of routines that we currently have and how these would be upskills for hybrid. So I'm going to go over to the right. This is our secondary example. If you are an elementary school teacher, you might want to pause the video and just read through this elementary example on the left-hand side. So if we're thinking about our secondary students, a virtual routine we may have is students enter the Google Meet and spend the first 3 minutes answering the bell ringer using Menti, which is a tool that you may use in your classroom. And then teacher uses warm calls to collect answers. That could be a routine that you currently have. Now, an upskill for hybrid, if we're thinking about how will students come into my classroom um, in the hybrid setting, right, where I have some students face to face, this upskill is going to be students enter the physical classroom, get a squirt of hand sanitizer, and then have 3 minutes to complete the bell ringer using pencil and paper. Teacher uses warm calls to collect answers from class teams. Do you see that there are similarities between these two skill sets? Therefore, making it an upskill, something that's going to be a little bit easier to translate to the hybrid setting because we're not reinventing the wheel. So here is a graphic organizer that I created that might help us think about bridging those upskills, right? Thinking about those existing skills that students have virtually, how we're going to bridge these skills so that we end up with desired skills for the hybrid setting. And also drawing attention to the fact that there may be barriers that we face along the way. So here's an example that we may see in an elementary school classroom. If I have my desired skills over here, what do I want my students to be able to do in this hybrid setting? I'm thinking about when students come into the classroom here. So I want them to hang up their backpack, wash their hands, sit on their designated carpet spot, and greet peer with a handshake. But these aren't going to be students touching each other. This is going to be like a distant handshake that students are going to create with one another. So what are their existing skills? Right now, their routine for entering my elementary school virtual classroom is students log into the Google Meet, they mute their mic, they use their raise hand icon, they greet a peer, and they do their virtual handshake. So when I need to move these existing skills into these desired skills, I also need to consider the barriers, right? Hand washing, that's going to be important. A barrier might be having enough soap. Another barrier might be proper hand washing. Oh yeah, I'm going to need to teach my students exactly how to wash their hands in my classroom. Another barrier might be ensuring that students are kept socially distant during this time. So, keeping all of this in mind, how are we going to bridge these skills from our existing skills to our desired skills? Bridging these skills, this is our upskills part, right? So we're going to need to teach students how to wash their hands. And I might consider doing this in a Google Meet. I'm going to teach students how to wash their hands while I'm working with them virtually before we even get to hybrid. I might even consider making a class hand washing song to make this more fun and help students commit it to memory. So now my new routine in the virtual setting is students are going to log in, they're going to take a minute and go wash their hands, and then we're going to start our morning meeting, right? This is making sure that students have some of these skills already, so when we move into hybrid, this desired skills part, they are already a step ahead. Now, does that sort of triumph over all of my barriers? Not necessarily, but it did help with some of them. So as far as next steps, we recommend, again, looking at some of those routines and procedures in your virtual classroom that are working well. Then you may consider using the aforementioned graphic organizer or a similar graphic organizer to think about how to upskill those routines and procedures to meet your needs in the hybrid setting. This might be something that you do independently, but I can also see this working really well as a grade level team or a content team, or maybe just a group of teachers that you trust, and working through these together. More heads is better than one. And of course, we recommend that you reach out for continued support. Our behavior support specialist team is here and eager to help you with all things virtual learning, hybrid learning, and face-to-face learning. You can email us at bss@aps.edu. We also recommend that you follow our YouTube channel and find us on Twitter at APS BSS Team. You can also reach out to me directly. Again, my name is Anna Kay, and you can find my email address here on this slide. If you would like some more resources, if you would like a copy of that graphic organizer, or if you just want to keep this conversation going, I encourage you to reach out. I appreciate the work you do. Thank you for helping our students across the district.